That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons a podcast shall rise. H.P. Lovecraft, Weird Tales, Ramsey Campbell, Cthulhu, Laird Barron, Silent Hill, Brian Lumley, Dagon. There's something sinister out there in the cosmos, and the tendrils run deep throughout the universe. Only one woman dares to traverse the web. Mary SanGiovanni, who once again is up to cosmic shenanigans.
Hi folks, welcome to Cosmic Shenanigans. This is Mary SanGiovanni, and once again I am up to shenanigans of cosmic and sort of sexy proportions. This week we are going to be talking about the novella Trolley No. 1852 by Edward Lee. This book came out from Deadite Press in 2010. That's the copy that I read, but it first appeared as a limited edition hardback from Bloodletting Press in 2009. Now, there's several striking things about this particular book, and I'm glad that I got to cover this one because most cosmic horror falls under what I think most people would agree as quiet horror. To an extent, psychological horror, but mostly I think it falls under quiet horror. And that's not always the case. Cosmic horror can be surreal, it can be bizarro, and as I am reliably informed, although to be honest I don't read as much of extreme horror or splatterpunk as perhaps others do, that there's often an element of cosmic horror in extreme and splatterpunk, which sounds to me like it is essentially something that is used. It's almost like when the body goes into shock, that things can feel. Time feels a little weird. Space feels a little weird. It's almost a defensive mechanism that the body puts the mind through, so that it is not dealing second after second after second of unbearable pain or disconnects. In other words, it disconnects basically. And I think that maybe these subgenres do that. They use a bit of cosmic horror to partially to untether from the awfulness that they're writing about, the awfulness of society, and maybe to simulate in a way that sense of shock, that sense of confusion and distortion that the most extreme traumas to the body can cause. Now, one of the things that I liked about this particular novella is that Lee has a very deft way of interspersing humor at the absurd, to break the most tense of scenes, and basically to keep the grotesque from toppling over into the obscene. There's I think an element of extreme horror and splatterpunk that is a fine line, where something goes from being a vehicle for examining, the cruelty of human nature to becoming something that is just uncomfortable enough to stop being entertaining. And what I've noticed is that Lee diffuses that and kind of really puts it in perspective by introducing the humor that is almost inherent in something so cruel that it is almost absurd. And I like that. I thought it was very, very expertly done in that way. And one of the things that occurred to me as I was reading this too is that, in a way, cosmic horror and extreme horror share the indulgence of the grotesque, albeit it's often different aspects of the grotesque, but there is often the same overwhelming helplessness in both, in the presence of cruelty or indifference, and the enormity of fates worse than death. And I think in the wrong hands, this can come across in both subgenres as being trite or ridiculous, or just somehow sort of, lecherous and kind of creepy. But in this book, as I mentioned, Lee uses humor. He uses a degree of wanton sexuality, and he uses violence to underscore the horror of those elements and the scope of their pervasiveness, which I think works as both, cosmic horror and, and extreme horror, splatterpunk, kind of an idea. Lee also seems to understand Lovecraft's unique peculiarities as a person, both in his own correspondences, which I've seen, and in how he crafted Gary Stews, which is basically what writers use to describe characters, which are very much a perfect version of themselves, the through a character who the author would like to be. And Lovecraft often crafted characters which were very much like him. I'm not even sure that they would count as Gary Stews, because there was not necessarily any improvement on these characters. They were just Lovecrafts that were basically in these stories. And they had pretty much the same strengths and weaknesses as he did. And this novella is written is not quite as an epistolary type of story, but almost. It's a story within a story where we're seeing Lovecraft struggle with his first commissioned story, where he needs to write pornography as an element of the story that he's submitting for this magazine, which would take care of he and his aunt take care of their bills for at least a year. I mean, this is the kind of money that they were offering him. And for a working writer, I think Lee captures that sort of desperation. It's like, well, this is completely outside my comfort zone, completely outside my experience base, but I need the money. And the story that we read, Trolley number 1852, is the story that Lovecraft comes up with. So it's sort of end-capped with Lovecraft's attempt at writing this particular type of story, which is so completely opposite what most people would naturally associate with Lovecraft. But what I liked is that Lee seems to know a lot about Lovecraft's life and his views on things, and I like that he captures the concept that despite Lovecraft's few depictions of women as anything other than vessels or gossips or basically evil witch women, Lovecraft didn't really harbor any hate toward them. Rather, if you read about his life, it was really more that he was easily dominated by the women in his life. Everyone from his mom to his aunts to his wife. And that he was probably someone who was more mystified and perhaps a little daunted by the complexities of their character. He, I think, relied on their approval of him. He relied on their need for him in certain ways. And when he failed those things, particularly with his wife, it was kind of unbearable, and he just moved back with his aunt. So there is a sense that I think Lovecraft was swayed by women, the women that were in his life, but was certainly not somebody who had the confidence of feeling that he was maybe their, certainly, I'm not even sure he felt he was their equal, let alone, that he could dominate them in any way, other than in writing. But then again, Lovecraft kind of thought he dominated most of the people that he did ghostwriting for, despite the fact that he really didn't think very highly of his own work. So I think, like I said, Lovecraft, he had some complex views, and I think when it came to women, he was a little mystified, and he was a little confused. And I think his prudish reputation stems primarily from this old-fashioned idealism that he clung so desperately to, which would likely have viewed more carnal pursuits as sort of debasing, as sort of the lower nature of man. And I don't think it's so much that he didn't appreciate what intimate relationships could offer, but just that I don't think he thought that much about them as something that he needed to prioritize. And you get that sense from this novella that Lee understands that That it isn't a case of him turning it away. It's a case of him kind of not knowing what to do with it all the time. But that, maybe, given some of the things that Lovecraft wrote about, that maybe he was more plugged into that facet of humanity than we often give him credit for. See, this leads me to another aspect of cosmic horror, which I think Lee captures here, and it's often overlooked. Lovecraft wrote a lot about these sort of fainting, shrinking violet protagonists, these people who were seldom able to give great detail about the horrors that they were seeing. But if you look at, if you read in between the lines, Lovecraft's work contains body horror and a good degree of sexual perversion. And we've discussed the body horror element of it before, but Lovecraft alludes to some sexual deviancy in Call of Cthulhu, in the Dunwich Horror, Shadow over Innismouth, and others. That there are suggestions of bestiality, of interspecies sexual conquest, of orgies, rape, and then along with sacrifice and mutilation, and other of cannibalism, and really of forcible bodily changes. Because as we've discussed in the past, cosmic horror is often at its core a genre of fluidity of boundaries and standards. That time and space itself is not beholden to these things. Not really. And so that nothing that we count on as being physically and surely there as it is, in that reality is structured as it is, that none of that is really reliable. And I think there is what cosmic horror looks at is the real horror that emerges from the human psyche being forced to accept that these things are not stable, solid delineations, that there is a fluidity that we cannot control, and that once that fluidity touches us, we lose control of our own selves, both mentally and physically. And I think this is where Lee's work here really shines in this novella, because he embraces in graphic detail the sexual gluttonousness and perversion of basically of creatures and their and their servants that are connected to things larger than the physical self. And it reduces really the most erotic, the most heinous, and the most exhaustive sexual encounters to a mere mechanical function that helps otherworldly entities reach their end goal of utter invasion. You have that these most intense sexual experiences, which, if you think about it, are experiences for human beings which sometimes feel like the pinnacles of human experience. These are the important moments that shape and define the significance of existence. And because these are, sex is connected to the perpetuation of the human race and of creating life, which is the closest ability to a godlike power that humans have. And the fact that these are reduced to the simple collection of biological expenditure is in itself a kind of horror, which I think certainly meets the nihilistic aspect of cosmic horror. It's that those experiences that we hold often to be very dear become the slave work of an interdimensional race and its own creations. That's horror on a cosmic scale, that one of the most significant things that humans are capable of doing, at least from a, biological perpetuation of the race point of view, that it becomes less a gift and more a chore. And now Lee has some absolutely beautiful passages in this. And you know that I'm a sucker for those kinds of things. And I want to read one because I really feel that, I feel that this is a good moment here where you get to see the, not just the cosmic horror aspect of it, but the fact that, that Lee really truly understands cosmic horror in a way that's deeper than people who do like hollow pastiches, I think, of Lovecraft's work. once learned of all the pyramidile's harrowing secrets, El Ahab ruled the ancient outlands to slaughter, pillage, rape, and defile, all in the name of the pyramidiles, who lived on realms not of this earth, or even this solar system, but in the screaming upside-down crevices between space and time. Indeed, the pyramidiles, the putrid flesh gods, eyeless, brain-filled masses of otherworldly organa, each the size of a mountain and suspiciously the shape of a pyramid. See, I like that. And we're gonna come to this idea of the creatures now. We have in this book, of course, cosmic horror, godlike beings, of a huge scale, both physically and intellectually. If you look at their pursuits, these beings created the Thogs, which sort of I think serve as kind of like Shoggoths. I mean, Lovecraft mentions, in this the end part of the end cap of his portion of this novella, that he repurposed, because he's supposed to be writing under a pseudonym, so he repurposed some of his own mythology, and these are kind of the Shoggoths of this particular this particular pantheon, I guess, and that they are only one. The Thogs they're only one type of being that the pyramidiles have created in order to infiltrate and conquer various worlds. We see the interdimensional landscape. Lee takes us into this other world where the pyramidiles actually are, and we see this landscape that the pyramidiles have created for themselves. This is the kind of power they have. They have created a reality. They have created an existence, a plane of existence for themselves to basically to hang out in while they, move from world to world. And that this interdimensional landscape allows access to our world and countless worlds in this universe, as well as countless worlds in many other universes, which anybody who reads my stuff knows that I ascribe to as well, this idea that there are multiple worlds and multiple universes for our cosmic horror entities to play in. And the pyramidiles are they're older than time. I mean, they're older than that, even. And they're bent on the systematic destruction of whole planets, basically to provide the pain and horror on which they feed. And they're these huge pulsing pyramids. It's actually, and this is the other thing that I like about cosmic horror that I think Lee captured very well. And if you look at something like, say, Silent Hill, you get that there. The creatures are simultaneously beautiful and horrific. And I think that is achieved when when you get a certain physicality, a certain sexuality, that is, when you're capturing both the beauty and the horror of sex, the grossness maybe, and the transcendence of something sexual. And to me, some of the best cosmic horror monsters manage to capture both at the same time. And it's not an easy thing to do. It is not easy to make a creature somehow both beautiful and sexually grotesque to the point of horror. And still manage to capture both of those things in equal measure in the same creature. And yet you kind of get that with these huge pulsing pyramids of this sort of sickly, white flesh with swirling, almost like rot green, color in it and in the flesh. They're very intelligent. They're indifferent to suffering. They check off all the boxes of a true cosmic horror god type nightmare. And they take the shape of, I think there's a certain irony in this. They take the shape of what were once thought to be stairways to heaven, pathways to the gods, or in a more symbolic sense, the closest we can get to deities, to gods themselves. And these are almost pathways to a completely different direction. And again, we have the sense that that they've bred these nearly mindless servants, driven by telepathic numeric commands to torture and kill. And so what I think Lee has done here, which is kind of cool, is that he's managed to create entirely different creatures of his own, his own creative mind and his own cosmic horror pantheon in a way, but still, have a reasonable framework for it to reflect Lovecraft's approach to doing that kind of thing, because it's supposed to be Lovecraft writing his own kind of thing, but under a pseudonym, and doing what he does best, doing what he knows how to do in the way that he knows how to do it, without completely giving away that it's him doing it because he's supposed to be writing under the pseudonym. We also have, I think, a very much a cosmic horror ending. Now, we've discussed endings in cosmic horror, I think, in the past, in that a lot of modern cosmic horror practitioners create a semi-happy ending. I call it a satisfying ending. At least it's one in which the world is, for now, no longer on the verge of utter destruction. And in a smaller scale, because I think a lot of modern cosmic horror reframes scale as being the only way to recapture some sense of significance to what would utterly be, otherwise completely pointless lives, that there is a sense that the character is coming through it with at least the bare minimum of what the character needs to not feel like he or she has totally failed. So it's a satisfying ending. But whether it's a happy ending or not, there's a lot of gray area there, because sometimes the characters just get through it and are horribly scarred by the experience. Sometimes they get through it by having achieved one goal at the expense of so much else. And often so much else is a certain moral or psychological or physical toll. But I think in some of the most memorable modern cosmic horror stories, there's a sense of nihilism in which that could only be the natural outcome, that everything is not okay. That now that we know this, nothing will ever be okay again. And Lovecraft often suggested that just, even if the world is going to live to fight another day and these characters aren't dead yet, that it's really just a matter of time before the thing that we know that it catches up to us, that we can't ever go back to the way things were before we knew that this cosmic horror existed. And that's the kind of ending that Lee gives us here. We now have not only the utter enslavement and the moral and physical degeneration, basically, of the hero, but also the inescapable knowledge that his sacrifice to save his sister is ultimately going to contribute to the extinction of his own race. And then furthermore, he has no hope for death to end it, because the nature of the sacrifice is that he doesn't age and he doesn't die. So it's basically consigning himself to hell in order to save somebody else. And in my opinion, one of the most terrifying aspects of cosmic horror is that there are fates worse than death. That there are things, much like we said with cosmic horror having these fluid boundaries, that there are horrors and evil and traumas that can transcend death. And that, even our most final and permanent, I guess, solution to ending the problems that we have, even that's not enough, because these things will find us even beyond death. And I think that's kind of terrifying. And for the time being, there is nothing this character can do to stop that. But again, as I mentioned, there are end caps. This is a supposed Lovecraft story. And then we see Lovecraft having finished it and sent it off to the magazine. And again, we see that Lee is using humor to diffuse the most horrific of situations, if only just to make them bearable to read. And I like that the epilogue here is a win for the often maligned sexual prowess of H.P. Lovecraft himself. I think, is rewarded, let's say, for, writing something which is both titillating and terrible, and terrible not in quality, but terrible in its implication. That it is true horror, in its, and yet somehow still sort of, erotic even so. And I like that. I like that, that Lovecraft has his own little win right there. And all in all, as I said, I thought this was an excellent blending of cosmic and extreme horror in a way that feels natural and appropriate and fair to both subgenres. It's erotic, it's horrific, and it's funny all at once. And that's not an easy thing to do. So check it out. It's Trolley number 1852. And it's a quick read. I read it in one day. And that's it. That's it for this week. If you want to advertise on Cosmic Shenanigans, you can email Matt Wilderson at flawnot1@yahoo.com, or you can check out past, present, and future episodes of Cosmic Shenanigans any place where you're listening to podcasts, wherever you're listening to this one. You can go back through the archives and check out some other cosmic horror goodies. And I will see you next week. Okay, bye.
Cosmic Shenanigans. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Cosmic Shenanigans is written and produced by Mary SanGiovanni. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.